Good evening, those of you here in Israel with us in person or on Zoom, and good afternoon for those watching in North America. My name is Paul Gross. I'm a senior fellow here at the Menachem Begin Heritage Center in Jerusalem. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to another of our English events. We've been doing a whole series that are particularly relevant for the situation that Israel found itself in for the past year and a bit, both the ongoing security situation and but also issues around that, which we're going to touch on today. So I think everyone in this audience, both here in person and watching, is very aware of the question of media and how important, how critical the way Israel is covered is to Israeli diplomacy, PR, its image. We're all, I think, painfully aware of how it's covered in much of the Western media. What we're perhaps less aware of, for obvious reasons, is the Arab media coverage of Israel. But that, of course, is of huge importance because the Arab street, so to speak, gets its news and its facts, or perhaps I should say in certain circumstances, facts, from its media outlets. And the Arab world is perhaps peculiarly focused on Israel, on this rather small corner of the Middle East. We've seen in recent days that there's an awful lot happening elsewhere in the Middle East, which is which should be of greater importance and of greater impact to Arabs in this region. But there is a focus on Israel, nevertheless, for reasons that we're all aware of. So I was very happy to be able to invite someone who has been following, not just following the Arab media, but has worked for organs of the Arab media in recent years, and is today working here in Israel on this topic. Suzan Quitaz is a Kurdish-Swedish journalist and a researcher on Middle Eastern affairs with a specialization in Israeli politics, Saudi Arabia, political Islam, Kurdish affairs, and contemporary antisemitism. She's currently working here in Jerusalem at the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. She hosts a podcast and is a journalist for a series called Exposing the Lies, about countering disinformation and misinformation in the Arab media, about Israel, the IDF, the war in Gaza and Lebanon, and antisemitism. She conducts interviews in Arabic and English with high-profile figures, debunking what has been said in mainly the Qatari and Iranian Muslim Brotherhood influenced press. She's conducted interviews with senior IDF officers and many other experts. She's also conducted freelance research and writing assignments for several media outlets, including Al Majalla, which is a Saudi current affairs magazine, The New Arab, a Qatari pan-Arab newspaper, and Memory. She also worked as a freelance producer on 3 documentaries for Al Jazeera, which I think will be very interesting to hear about, including a work on Avraham Stern, The Man, the Gang, and the State, which was aired in February of this year. She previously worked for several years as a field producer and researcher for Al Arabi television network, which is a 24-hour Qatari news channel. So I'm going to introduce and welcome onto the stage to discuss this with me, Suzan Quitaz. Okay, yes, that works. Very good. Suzan, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, as I said in the introduction, I wanted to particularly discuss this topic of Arab media, the way it covers Israel, and particularly this last 15 months or so of war. But before we do that, let's have a little bit about your background, because obviously that is fascinating and very different from many of the guests that we would have here who are usually Israelis. You were born in Iraq? In Baghdad. Yes. And then you had to flee to Iran with your family.
My family was deported in 1980, April. And the reason they were deported because they were Kurds. The Iraqi government said you are not Iraqi citizens, so they took our citizenship and we were dropped on the border. I was 3 years old. I don't remember much, but they did arrest my two uncles. They were in jail for a number of years and then they were executed. And moving to Iran, we went to live in the Kurdish region. Today, I'm an adult and I don't speak Kurdish. And the reason why I don't speak Kurdish, because at that time it was against the law, well, it still is, to speak Kurdish. And,
in Iran?
In Iran. And my dad's dream was to move to Soviet Union because this is where he studied as a young man. So we went to Syria. And again, in Syria, the same thing during Hafez al-Assad time, it was against the law to speak Kurdish. So I didn't speak Kurdish. And we lived in a Jewish neighborhood. There were a few Jews still in Damascus, in one of the old neighborhood. And they didn't talk about their Jewishness, our neighbor. And my mom just said, don't talk about the Jews, don't talk about the Jews, don't talk that you Kurds. And when I was brought up in Syria, I left Syria when I was 11. And there was a lot of the indoctrination in the schools, like glorifying Ba'athism, glorifying Arabism. I was denied to say I'm Kurdish. And I will be honest with you, to the age of 12, I saw myself as an Arab, a proud Ba'athist, because this is what they taught at school. And I remember during that time, there was a terrorist attack in Israel, Dalal al-Maghribi. And the teacher was talking about it. And everybody at the school, they wanted to be Dalal al-Maghribi. And I went home and I said to my mom, I want to be like Dalal al-Maghribi. And my dad just looked at me. I mean, they knew who Dalal al-Maghribi was. She was a terrorist who killed innocent civilians,
Right, this is a Palestinian terrorist from Lebanon, based in Lebanon.
Yes, yeah. But the glorification was so huge that everybody at the school, this was their dream. And eventually, we managed to go to the Soviet Union. We stayed for 6 months, and then we went to Sweden.
Probably a good move.
Yeah, move, yes. And once I was in Sweden, my mom started talking about her past in Iraq, about her Jewish neighbor in Iraq. And so when I went to university, I decided to study Jewish history. And growing up in Sweden, at that time, it was compulsory to study the history of the Holocaust. It's not compulsory anymore because of the influence of immigrants and the rise of the far left in Sweden. So Sweden has changed radically from when I was brought up in Sweden as a teenager.
You still have family there, right?
I still have family. Yeah. My mom, my two brothers, they still live in Sweden. And for me, it was very difficult to read about my past being a Kurd. I was ashamed, and I'm still ashamed that I don't speak Kurdish. I'm very proud Kurd, but I don't speak Kurdish. And I decided that I want to be a journalist, and I want to specifically work for Arab media and give voice to the voiceless minority, the people who are part of the Middle East, the Kurds, the Jews, the Druze, people who are part of this region, but they've been denied to right they exist. I grow up, hearing from Arabs saying, I don't have anything against the Jews. I don't have anything against the Kurds. And they don't. As long as you don't ask for a state, as long as you don't ask for your political right.
Yeah.
And then I decided in 2014 to apply for a job at Al Arabi Television, which is a Qatari channel, a sister channel of Al Jazeera. And when you go to an interview, they ask you the first question, why shall I take you? And my first, I answered, and this guy, the guy who interviewed me, he's a secular Arab, he's a very big media personality from Egypt. And I said to him, I could cover for you Israel. And he said to me, Suzanne, we have thousands of journalists who cover Palestine. And I said to him, precisely, you have thousands of journalists who cover for you Palestine. I could cover for you Israel. And he looked at me. He was like, okay, we have someone here. But eventually they decided to give me the job. And but it took me 2 years. So I joined in 2014. 2 years to convince the channel, please, let's bring Israeli voices. So the editorial guidelines of Al Arabi channel was, we do not give a platform to Jews, to Israeli. So how do they talk about Israel? Easy. They want to bring people who are hostile to Israel to tell the viewers what Israel is all about. But in 2017, as we were reaching the 100 years of the Balfour Declaration, one of the director in Qatar, I think he's known to a lot of Israeli, Azmi Bishara.
For those that don't know, either here, Azmi Bishara is a former member of Knesset, a disgraced member of Knesset in Israel that had to flee because he was charged with crimes of espionage for Hezbollah. So he's now fighting the good fight in Qatar.
Yeah. He's in Qatar now. He works as the advisor for the Prince of Qatar. And he sits on the board of Fada'at Media, which is a group of media. Al Jazeera is part of it, the New Arab, the Al Arabi Television. So,
and just so that we're clear, when we're talking about Al Arabi and Al Jazeera, these are networks which are, they're not just Qatari, they are, the line is set by the Qatari government,
of course,
right?
yes.
There's no independence here, right? Just so everyone's clear on this.
They're not. I mean, these channels are not. They don't make any profit. So they're not like any channels you have to bring commercials. No, they get the money directly from the Qatari government, and one of our job is to promote Qatar foreign policy. So when in 2017 they said to me, you could work on this film as a leading producer and senior researcher, and you could bring Israeli guests. And I was like, wow, this is a miracle. But there were objection inside the newsroom from the big bosses, because I already was seen as a
troublemaker.
Troublemaker. First, I was a Kurd. And secondly, there were rumors that I'm an Israeli, an Israeli who worked for the Mossad.
Of course.
But we all do. So
yeah.
So there was a lot of objection.
I think, according to Israel's enemies, Mossad has the largest the largest workforce on the entire planet. Everyone works for Mossad.
Of course, and what makes me angry, because I had this label for almost 10 years that I work for the Mossad. And believe me, I haven't seen a single shekel from the Mossad. I'm still waiting for my...
If anyone's watching.
For my my money, but So there was a lot of objection, but eventually, they couldn't say much, because the decision was coming from Doha that we need to give, finally, Israel a platform. I mean, imagine this channel is in London, broadcasting from London. But Jews and Israeli are not allowed to be on the platform. And Israel is referred to as Dawlat al-Sahayna, how do you say? The
Zionist entity.
And the Israeli army is the occupation army. And Arab Israelis, they don't talk about Arab Israeli, they all Israeli settlers. So for me, I mean, this is one of my biggest achievements working for this channel, is to force them to recognize that Israel exists,
Yeah.
And I worked on the film, but they had certain condition. One of them was we had to bring Ilan Pape, which everybody knows who Ilan Pape is.
Okay, just for this, so I don't know, not, again, we have a larger audience on Zoom. For those who don't know, Ilan Pape is indeed an Israeli historian, although historian might be stretching it.
Yes.
He's an extremely anti-Zionist, anti-Israel Israeli historian whose work I recommend Googling Googling his name and seeing the numerous takedowns of his pieces in which the discrepancies in his research have been found by multiple sources. Yeah, so Ilan Pape was the Israeli expert.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
And when I interviewed him, he kept talking about the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. And I asked him a question. I said to him, how do you explain there are more than 2 million Arabs in Israel? And he became really angry. So angry he was going to stop the interview. And I felt, it can't happen because I will be in trouble. If I go to the station and said the interview is canceled, and I start talking to him, I said to him, look, it's a legitimate question and I need to ask you that question. Eventually the producer, a really nice guy, a Kurdish guy actually, we convinced him to continue with the interview. But 2 years later, they asked me to interview him again, and I called him. He was in Haifa. So despite he talks a lot about Israel and Israel being an apartheid, he still have a house in Haifa. So I called him and I said to him, I want you for another interview for another film. And he said, but in a very respectful manner, he said, I don't want to be interviewed by a Zionist journalist. So we decided to bring another journalist. So the film was done and I was very happy with the outcome. And there is a customary in TV that the leading producer, the person who was in charge of the production, he will be on TV to talk about the film. But the last minute, they decided, no, somebody else will talk about it. And I was like, why? The film, the first name appear on the film, it's me, Suzan Quitaz. And I was told that because you probably will refer to Israel
as Israel.
As Israel. And I was like, what's the problem? And they said, well, it goes against the policy because, the viewers will be offended.
Right.
That they have someone who actually called Israel, Israel. So to cut the story short, somebody else was in charge of this. I mean, working for that channel, it wasn't easy because I already had the label that I'm Kurd, I'm a Zionist, I work for the Mossad. And our editorial guidelines are very, very strict when it comes to Israel. If anyone is familiar with Arab media, we have something called red lines. And red line is no criticism to the ruler and no questioning of Islam. So you can't have any debate of the Islam as a religion. And then Israel. I mean, we don't have any other red lines, like it's only Israel. So when I say Israel, is the way you talk about Israel. You cannot portray Israel in a positive line. Israel always have to be seen as an aggressor, a brutal occupation. We're not allowed to talk about Israel in any positive way. I remember we had a Palestinian producer, actually, who lives in Ramallah and still does. She's Palestinian. She said, what you're doing, guys, is not right, because if you go to Ramallah, there are cinemas, there are bars, there is a thriving cultures, Palestinian, own houses, and they live good life. Why can't we do a documentary series talking about how Ramallah is? And I said, I would suggest it. And I actually did suggest it. I wrote a big emails to the head of the program department. And I said, let's do a series about how beautiful Palestine is. He said to me, do you want to whitewash the occupation? And so it was no.
Right. It's about narrative, right?
Yes.
It's not about facts. It's about sticking to the narrative, and if the facts are inconvenient, then you leave them out.
Of course, and you know what annoys me with Ilan Pape, because despite he did an interview and he talked about Well, he talked about, he distorted the history. When I was editing the work, and I was sitting with two editors, uh, and we showed an image from the Holocaust, this editor said, I don't believe there were 6 million who were killed. And, I pity him. And I pity him because he's defending a people who can't even recognize and admit that Hitler committed those atrocity against the Jews. And here he is defending and promoting Qatari Muslim Brotherhood narrative. And people, not only in Al-Arabi, but in everywhere in Qatari media, a lot of people, they deny even the Holocaust has happened. So I don't know.
Okay, so I want to move on to Al Jazeera because Al Jazeera is the name in Arab media that many of us will have heard of, partly because it's so extraordinarily successful with a huge viewership, but also because it has an English channel. So before I get to your specific experience there, can you tell us if there are differences in the editorial line between the Arabic and the English Al Jazeera?
So, I mean, there is a slight difference when it comes to Israel.
Okay.
So in Al Jazeera, they call Israel. And
in the English.
In the English.
Yeah.
And they used to bring a lot of like Israeli, even like, from, let's say, from what we call the far right. But since October the 7th, this has changed. What Al Jazeera does now since October the 7th, and we've seen it not only in Al Jazeera, I mean, internationally, post-October the 7th, anti-Semitism has been normalized.
Yeah.
It's okay to hate the Jews, but, they don't say, I hate the Jews, they will say Israel. And now what they do is they bring a lot of far-left supporters, white people, like, from the US, from Europe, to
progressives, quote unquote, yes.
Progressive.
Very, very progressive.
To, in a way, to what do you call it? To corrupt the mindset of their white audience, because Al Jazeera English is popular as well, in Europe, in America, even in Sweden. So what they do is they will bring all these progressive, and these progressive, they will tell their side of the story. They will portray Israel no different from an Arab Islamist. But, they look white, they look beautiful, nice with a tie. And when the European look at it, they say, look, I mean, even they saying Israel is an occupation. Israel is a brutal force.
Can you give a personal example maybe of how you've experienced the change since October 7th?
Yeah, so in 2023, I received a call from one of the director, and they wanted to do a film about Abraham Stern. For me, it was shocking. Like, Al Jazeera want to do a film about Lehi. And the director said to me, it will be very objective. We will give the Israeli side, a fair amount of coverage. I mean, we have Yair Stern in the audience, so maybe later we could ask his opinion, what he thinks about the movie. And to be honest, at the beginning it was very fine. They said to me, you defend the Israeli side, bring guests who will defend Lehi, and we will bring our own side. And it went really well. And the director, we have a WhatsApp group. In the WhatsApp group, he left me a voice message, saying that Haj Amin al-Husseini, it's a Nazi, and he hated the Jews, and I'm so glad you managed to bring Yair Stern on board. But post October the 7th, things change. I was in Israel in September, working with an amazing Al Jazeera team. 1 week after the October the 7th, I was blocked from the WhatsApp group. I was called liar. And
because you were saying what?
I didn't say anything because
you were just here.
I was here, and the war started. As my mom said, maybe Al Jazeera think that the head of the IDF is my uncle. I mean, I wish he was my uncle, but he's not. I received a WhatsApp message saying to me, tell your friends in the IDF there are innocent people in Gaza. And this is just a week after October the 7th. They didn't talk about the victim of the October the 7th. They didn't talk about the brutality Hamas committed, but they reminded me that, there are innocent people in Gaza. And the director, who was a colleague of mine from Al Arabi, this is how I know him. I have known him for years. He blocked me, and the nice gentleman called me even a liar on Twitter.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so Al Jazeera changed after the October the 7th, and I'm talking about Al Jazeera English.
Right.
Suddenly, it was persona non grata to bring, Israeli voices.
Because the war started, and they decided we're picking a side.
Of course, yeah.
And Israel is the enemy, and
Yes.
we won't not only will we condemn what Israel's doing in Gaza, but we refuse to even acknowledge,
of course,
how this whole thing started.
Yeah, I mean, Al Jazeera Arabic just even before, well, or not. Okay, let me be fair. A week after the war started, they start putting on their screen a banner said genocide in Gaza. So already, like a week, and they talking about genocide, and they would bring people who will actually enforce this message.
Yeah.
And one thing I forgot to tell you when it comes to the editorial guidelines for Qatari channels. So before we bring the guest, we interview the guest behind the scene,
right,
to make sure that this guest will endorse what's going to be said online. I mean, thank God I didn't work in the newsroom, because it will be very difficult. I work for the documentary,
right,
and my job was only to cover the Israeli side. But I mean, I worked in the newsroom, and I have colleagues, and I was there in the newsroom. So they would interview the person in advance to make sure that they have the right people, be it he's a Jew from America or someone from Egypt, because they want a specific narrative to be aired. And so when they talk about al-ra'i wal-ra'i al-akhar, the opinion and the other opinion, guys, be aware that all these people have been interviewed before they go on air. So
okay, worth knowing. Very good. You also worked, so we talked about Al Arabi and Al Jazeera, which are both Qatari. Yes. You also worked for Al Majalla, which is a Saudi magazine.
Yes.
What were you doing for them? And can you say a little about the difference between working for a Saudi publication versus a Qatari one? Because we're also, all of us are very aware of the divide in the wider Middle East between those that are sort of, more favorable towards, let's say the West for sure, but also even with the possibility of normalizing with Israel. We have the UAE and Bahrain after the Abraham Accords, maybe one day the Saudis, but Qatar are very much on the other side of that, supporting Hamas, hosting Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood. But the Saudis are, more, let's say, more on our side. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Of course, yeah. So in 2021, I joined them as a regular freelance journalist, and my job was to cover Israel. And I tell you, from day one, the experience was very different. I mean, the chief editor then, he gave me the freedom to work as a journalist, not to be indoctrinated or follow a specific narrative. He said to me, cover Israel as you see it. And we done some amazing coverage talking about Israel. And in 2022, I suggested to him that we do a story about the IDF, about Arabs, Muslim, Christian, Jews working for the IDF. And he said to me, I mean, this would never, ever happen in Qatari, never. So he said to me, okay, let's do a piece about that. But so I came to Israel, I stayed 2 weeks, and I start interviewing Arabs, Muslim, who work for the IDF. People, soldiers who are really proud about being a Muslim and proud about being Israeli, and even more proud to serve in the IDF. I spent 2 weeks here. We collected so much data. It was a field trip.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, I was looking at Wikipedia or checking online. No, actually, we interviewed real people and real story.
Yeah, you were in the field.
In the field.
Yeah.
And then I came back to London, and the management decided. And when I say the management, I mean with Arab media, all Arab media, regardless if it's Saudi or Qatari, they connected to the ruler back home. And they decided to run this story on the cover magazine, which is a huge, because
This was the front cover of the magazine.
Yes, yeah. It came out in Arabic and English and in Farsi, and then it was translated to a number of languages, including Swedish. And the beauty about it, it was the first time ever an Arab magazine would feature a positive story about Israel.
When was this?
It was in July 2022.
Right.
And I was very proud. Not proud because I'm a journalist. No, I was proud because finally the Arab world could see there are 2 million Arab who live in Israel, and these people are exist. You know, these people are doctors, are engineers. They commanders in their IDF, and they everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, their existence has been denied in the Arab world.
Right.
In the Arab world, they don't want to talk about it. Why they don't want to talk about them? Because talking about them, it will embarrass the Arab world. I mean, look at me. I'm Kurdish, and I can't speak Kurdish. Today in Turkey, it's against the law to dance the Kurdish dance. It's against the law to speak Kurdish in the parliament. But here in Israel, you have 2 million Arabs, and they exist. But the Arab media, they don't want to show this story. And, you know, the story was covered.
Right. I mean, it's embarrassing for them, not only because the Arabs have obviously far greater rights than minorities do in Arab countries, but they also have, just on a purely basic sort of democratic level, greater rights than Arabs have in Arab countries. So, which is, you know,
of course,
clearly.
And even like, you know, during the war between IDF and Hamas, I have to salute the Saudi media, especially Al Arabiya. Al Arabiya is like the second biggest channel after Al Jazeera, and they always go head to head because they both like strong.
Not to be confused with Al Arabi, which is the Qatari one. Al Arabiya. Okay.
Al Arabiya has done an amazing job, and when I say an amazing job, I mean, guys, let's not forget that Saudi is in the Arab world. And sometimes you might hear Crown Prince Ibn Salman might say something you think it's against Israel. Believe me, it's not against Israel. I mean, there is a threat of the Muslim Brotherhood and the Muslim Islamists everywhere, including in Saudi Arabia. And sometimes you have to give some what we call like lip service, you know, public consumption. But they've done an amazing job. The Saudi media, especially Al Arabiya, they talk about the Israeli victims, but they equally talk about the suffering of Gaza under the hand of Hamas. You know, they bring people, Arab people, Palestinian people, who actually say, guys, let's not forget how this war started. I mean, the war started because of the atrocity Hamas has committed. You will never see that on Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera will never bring someone who would say that the war started because of the atrocity Hamas has committed. But you see it in Al Arabiya. And they put it so much that the Muslim Brotherhood supporters and Israel haters, Saudi haters, they started a tweet, not a tweet, a hashtag called Al Arabiya is a new Al Ibriya. Because Al Arabi and Al Arabiya in Ivrit, you know,
I see.
Al Ibriya.
That it's a Hebrew site somehow.
It's a Hebrew channel.
Right.
So they want to discredit the channel because they're airing the truth. And the truth is October the 7th, it was committed by Hamas. The war was imposed on Israel by Hamas. The suffering that going in Gaza, it was created by Hamas. And they bring voices, people who talk about that.
Wow. Okay, that's certainly encouraging when we think of the wider picture. I want to give you the opportunity to say a little about what you're doing now and the work of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs.
I host a show called Exposing the Lie. And the beauty about the show, we use Arab people. We don't bring Europeans or Israeli to debunk the lies being, spread in Arab media. We bring Arab voices, people who are Arabs, to talk about all these lies being circulating in Arab media, specifically in Qatari media.
The show is in Arabic.
The show is in Arabic, and sometimes subtitled to English. Like 2 days ago, we spoke with an Iraqi politician, a young Iraqi politician, who has a lot of support among Iraqi people, and he talked about the Iranian-backed militia, how they hijack the political life in Iraq, and and he said that most Iraqi, they can't wait for Israel to attack Iranian-backed militia. And you wouldn't hear that in the media. And he actually said it. This voice, this message, you don't hear it in the media because they don't want to talk about it in the media. And we aired the interview, and I was really surprised. I was so happy because when you go on our account on Twitter, a lot of young Iraqi from Iraq, they're saying, we can't wait for Israel to come and get rid of Iraq, of these Iranian-backed militias. And for me, this is a success because we need to bring the voices of the Arab world. You know, when you look at Qatari media, or when you look at The Guardian, forget the Qatari media. When you look at the Qatari, The Guardian, The Independent, the CNN, the BBC, they show you that the majority of Arabs hate Israel, that the majority of Arabs, they like Iran, they like Muslim Brotherhood. It's not true. I mean, I could talk about Iraq. It's not true, certainly when it comes to Iraq.
Interesting. I remember we had another guest that we had here a few months ago. I think you know Rowan Osman.
Yes, yeah.
Some of our audience might have been here for that as well. And she was saying, and Rowan's from Lebanon and Syria, she was asked the question whether, in her view, Lebanese and Syrians would be in favor of peace with Israel. And she said, without hesitation, she said, without a doubt, a majority of Lebanese and Syrians would be in favor of peace with Israel, which was very interesting and surprising, I think, for many people.
Of course. I mean, especially in Iraq, and I was really, I was surprised. I'm not surprised, but what surprised me is these people from Iraq, they actually posting from Iraq, saying, we can't wait for Israel to strike. And I mean,
we've kind of got our hands full right now, but but who knows? Who knows? Before I go to questions from the audience, I don't want to let the opportunity go to ask you about the Kurds, because it's not every day we have someone here who's from the Kurdish community here in the Middle East. And as we've said, this is a non-Arab minority in the Middle East, like the Jews. Like the Jews actually promised a nation state in the end of the First World War when the Western powers were carving up the region, although that promise was not fulfilled, and we ended up with Kurdish minorities in Iraq and Syria and Iran and Turkey. Can you tell us a little bit about what the picture looks like today? Maybe specifically, I'm thinking of Iraqi Kurdistan, which I know you visited, but also, of course, what's in the news right now, the Kurdish enclave in Syria. What's going on?
Well, to start with, the Kurds are 60 million, and they divided to 4 countries. Yet, you never see any Muslim or any Arab in London or in Washington or even in Cairo protesting, demanding 2-state solution, asking for their right, nothing. When it comes to Kurds and Jews, we don't exist for the Arabs and for the Muslim, but thank God the situation is not like this in the Gulf region, but exclude Qatar. So Kurds do not exist. Yes, today in the Kurdish region in Iraq, we have autonomy. We have full right.
How many people are we talking about? The Iraqi Kurdistan is...
the total is 60 million. We have about 22 to 25 million in Turkey.
Yeah.
But in Turkey, we don't exist.
Yeah.
In Iraq, we do have a lot of rights. And let's not forget, those rights were thanks to the American, not thanks to the Iraqi government.
Right.
What we have today in Iraqi Kurdistan, if it wasn't for George Bush, God bless his soul, and the American army, we would never be in the situation we are now. Because for most Arab, Kurds do not have the right to exist. you know?
Yeah.
And the biggest obstacle to Kurdish independence, it's Iran and Turkey. You know, what I see in Syria, the Syrian people are happy. I wish I could share their joy. Because as a Kurd, I can't visit the Kurdish region. One of the main reasons I can't visit, because I'm here in Israel. The over majority of Kurds are supportive of Israel. I mean, I could go and visit Iraqi Kurdistan, and I would have no issue visiting. But the problem is the Iranian militia, the Turkish militia, the Arab fascist militia. So they can't guarantee my safety, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like Erdogan I mean, his response to the fall of Assad has been a renewed assault on the Kurdish.
Yeah, so what will happen in Syria? You know, you get rid of the Iranian influence, you replace it with Erdogan. And it's not that different. I mean, one of them is Mullah and the other one is Muslim Brotherhood. So I don't know which the choice. And if you actually look at Syria, I mean, let's be honest. Who in charge now? We have the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is a jihadi Salafist group. I mean, I mean, the guy who had them, the Golani, he is wanted by the American. He committed a lot of atrocity in Iraq. And he used to have a very close alliance with Al-Qaeda and Jabhat al-Nusra. So this is the new Syria. And then you have the Free Syrian Army, which is a Sunni Salafist. Okay, some of them are not, backed by the Turks. So
you're not very positive about Syria's...
I'm not. And especially when it comes to minority, the Kurds, the Christian.
Right.
I mean, one of the first things they did when they went to Aleppo, I mean, imagine they had a fight with a Christmas tree. I don't know if you've seen it on social media. Some of the fighters, they decided to bring down a Christmas tree. I mean, this is the...
Yes.
This is the people who are part of the new Syria.
Right. Yeah, I think, you know, we're all aware that Israel has been very busy making sure that whatever Assad left behind, which could be put to nefarious use against Israel by the new regime, will not be available to them, which I think is very wise. The Golani, or Jolani, whoever it says his name, has said that he doesn't want that he wants stability in Syria now. He doesn't want to have any more wars. And that might well be the case, but what I think you're saying is that irrespective of that, it's not good news for the minorities inside Syria.
No,
right.
But I will take you back to before October the 7th. I mean, just week before October the 7th, Israeli companies, they were trying to establish more Israeli companies so they could recruit people from Gaza, you know, to improve their life. They already have like 24,000 Gazan who worked in Israel, who get salary from Israel. And what did they do? What they do? They committed October the 7th.
Yeah.
So do you really trust these people? I mean, weeks before October the 7th, everything was quiet. Everybody was thinking, wow, there are more opportunity for Gazan to improve their life. And as a thank you, what they did, Gazan civilians with terrorists, they came to Israel and they committed the most disgusting, brutal atrocity. No, I don't trust.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay. Okay, I want to give our audience here an opportunity to ask some questions. There's one hand up I see already. Just a second, I'm going to ask my colleague to take one of these mics. And okay, 2 hands. Okay, yeah.
Thank you for your insights. What comments do you have about the Arab press since the changes in Syria in the last week, 10 days? A, in general, and B, towards Israel.
Do you mean how the Arab press has reported on Syria?
Yep.
Okay.
And in particular, the Saudi press.
Okay, so how the Arab media has reported on what's happened in Syria.
Now, depending on Qatari channels, I mean, Qatari channels, it's glorification, celebration, because the Qatari supported the Free Syrian Army. In Saudi media, Emirati media, they're a bit cautious. They're a bit cautious because, I mean, the biggest enemy for United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia is the Muslim Brotherhood. And the new people, the new rebel in Syria, they all rooted in the Muslim Brotherhood. So they are very cautious about the whole thing. But Qatari media has been very positive.
It's interesting because there's this peculiar sort of alliance system in the Middle East, right, where you have Assad backed by the Iranians, the Iranians also backing Hamas, but Hamas is affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood, and so at least in theory has affiliation with the people who've just deposed Assad. I mean, this was the big problem during the Syrian civil war, where Hamas got into a lot of trouble with Iran for supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. So is that also playing out that the country? I mean, you mentioned like Qatar is supporting the new regime, but does Qatar risk alienating the Iranians if it does that?
No, it doesn't, because Iranian media already saying what's going on in Syria is an Israeli plot. So it's win-win. But they did say that a neighboring country is doing the dirty work. So I suspect he's talking about Turkey. But Qatar is very smart. I mean, Qatar knows how to balance, like Erdogan, how to balance Iran. So they would give good coverage to Erdogan and then good coverage to Ali Khamenei. So they're very smart. So we have three media. We have Al Mayadeen going in the same line as the Iranian, that is an Israeli-American plot. And then you have the Saudi, which is cautious, and the Qatari are celebrating.
Okay. Another question, yeah.
Thank you, Suzan, for the wonderful talk. Can you speak a bit about the European Arab media? So the channels that broadcast in Arabic, but are supported by the Western governments like BBC Arabic, Deutsche Welle Arabic, France, and how their line in comparison to the Arabic media from the Middle East?
Is this the media, you're talking about media where the main audience are Arab speakers in Europe?
Like BBC Arabic, Deutsche Welle Arabic.
Oh, I see.
So the audience are people speaking Arabic, mainly all around the world, but mainly in the Middle East. But these channels are being supported or financed by European countries.
Now, when it comes to Arab media, so you're talking about Western media broadcasting in Arabic. Yeah, BBC Arabic. I mean, I have to be fair. I watch now BBC a lot because specifically when it comes to Syria, their coverage has been very balanced. They will bring people who like Kurds, and they bring the the Human Rights Watch, the Syrian Human Rights Watch, who's based in London. Yes, and when they bring people, especially people who support the Muslim Brotherhood narrative or support this Jolani, they do question him. So it's been more balanced. They do talk about minorities. They do talk about what about the Kurds, what about the Christian, what about the Alawis, because let's not forget, I mean, Assad from the Alawi minority.
But about Israel, not about like their approach to Israel. Because
Well,
their journalists are usually people coming from the Middle East rather than Brits, French, or this.
Okay, so when I worked for Arab media, I thought the red line exists only in Arab media, only to be surprised that the BBC, who paid by financed by the British taxpayer, is like the new Al Jazeera. So about a few months ago, there was a big investigation about the BBC output, the Arabic output. And they found that the BBC committed more than 1,553 editorial breaches when it comes to Israel. I mean, it's even worse than Al Jazeera English. So when you talk about the BBC Arabic, despite it's paid by taxpayers, it's a British cooperation, they actually as bad as Al Jazeera. And this is not me saying, this was a huge investigation. Some of the BBC stuff, and I'll be talking about the journalists, they were posting on October the 7th, glorifying the beautiful resistance. And these people work for BBC. I mean, so I don't know what to tell you. All I could say that they made my former colleague at Al Arabi look much better.
Yes.
Suzan, as you have been here quite a few times and you are aware of what kind of Arabic media we have, the Voice of Israel, do you think that Arabs in the Arab world would be interested in hearing the voice of Israel here, Israelis?
This is the Israeli channel in Arab. The Israeli
right,
channel
in Arabic.
Yes.
Yes, I think so. I think that is, especially with the young people, you know, with the social media, people had enough. People had enough of 75 years of hatred, Israel, Israel, Israel. You know, people want to see the truth. People want to hear these stories, especially in the Gulf region. I mean, the Gulf region is evolving. I mean, I live in London. We have on a weekly basis pro-Hamas protest. And I could tell you, I actually haven't seen a single Arab from the Gulf region taking part in these protests. Arabs start waking up in Iraq. They know, even in Lebanon, they know that the Arab of Israel are doing much better than them. They free. It's a democratic society. And yes, I strongly believe there is a lot of interest. People want to know more about Israel, and they want to hear from Arab Israeli talking about themselves, and they want to hear about Israel from Israel, not from someone from Egypt who talk about Israel, but no, from Israeli, your voice to us. I don't know if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, any, yes, gentleman with the glasses, yeah.
Yes, we're just wondering whether you have occasion to discuss these issues also in other platforms in Europe, in London, in Germany, all those places.
Like now.
Yeah, did you catch the question? Sorry, what was the Germany point? I didn't quite catch the Germany bit.
No, just whether you have occasion to discuss these issues in
Europe.
In Europe,
okay. Whether you have the opportunity
for example, in Germany, where are so many people from Syria and from other countries, many Kurdim from Iraq and.
When you say discuss them, you mean live to be in those
like
places?
Here.
I see. Are you ever in European countries with the opportunity to talk like we're talking now about these issues?
Yeah, so a week after October the 7th, I was in Israel, and I went to some of the kibbutz. I spoke to soldiers. I was here among you. I saw the rockets. I saw the fear. I saw the people who lost their life. So when I went back to England and Sweden, I started taking this message to Arabs who live in diaspora. And I was quite disappointed, you know, very disappointed. I didn't see protests or hatred in the Arab world, in the heart of the Arab world, especially like in the Gulf region. But in UK, it's a lost case. I had people who would come to me and say to me, "Sister, why are you lying? Why are you spreading this Zionist propaganda? October the 7th, they did it." And I was like, just a week ago, you were celebrating. And now you're saying they did it? I was in Sweden when October the 7th happened. And where I come from, I mean, I lived in Sweden. I was brought up in Sweden, and Sweden has changed radically. Believe me when I say to you, a friend of us, an old lady, she was woken up in the middle of the night because people were celebrating. In Sweden, yes. I mean, immigrants. And what it makes me angry, these the same people who celebrated, a week later they shifted, saying, no, Hamas didn't commit this. So when it comes to Muslim diaspora, we say in Iraqi, I wash my hand. I wash my hand. But what I could say is I'm glad the Kurds didn't celebrate, the Iranian didn't celebrate, and I have to be fair, the Syrian didn't celebrate. In fact, many Syrian, they didn't even take part in these pro-Hamas protests. And when I asked them, journalists and friends and people I know, why don't you go and protest with these, Pakistanis and Indian and Somalians and God knows who? They said to me, I don't want to take part in this charade, in this hypocrisy, and this double standard. Assad killed more than 500,000 Syrian. And God knows how many Syrian, lost their life in the sea. I didn't see people protest. We didn't see people calling for Assad to go to tribunal. So why will I support this? Why will I be part of this charade? And I'm glad to see that Syrians, especially in diaspora, they're waking up to this nonsense, to this double standard, And but when it comes to the Muslim community in diaspora, I don't know.
In Sweden, so you talked about how Sweden's changed. The large Muslim minority in Sweden that you said has sort of become very militant in all kinds of ways. Where are they from, most of them?
Well, most of them from the Middle East. I mean, Sweden is quite a small country. I think about 20% are non-Swede. I give you an example. I mean, some people say it's good and some people say bad. When I was in Sweden at school, at 12, 13 years old, I was the darkest in my class. Believe me when I say where my mom lived, it's a small city outside Gothenburg. I'm actually the lightest in my class. Sweden has changed radically. When my family immigrated to Sweden in the 1980s, they were grateful that Sweden took them in. They try to adopt as much as possible to learn the Swedish language and to be grateful. But today, especially, after 2005, it has changed. It really has changed. In some part of Sweden, it's genuinely non-go area, not only for police, for people like us, for people who want to live in a democratic society where everybody is respected. You could have any faith. It has changed. It has changed. I mean, I'm someone who worked for some of the world's biggest channels. I applied for Swedish media, and I applied for the small one and the big one. About maybe 25. I didn't even get an interview. And I was like, what's going on? And I have a friends who work for the Swedish media. They said to me, Habibti, the first thing they will do, they will Google. And for them, you are promoting Israel. And I said, I'm not promoting Israel. I'm covering Israel. What do you mean I'm promoting Israel? I'm not an influencer. I'm not a peace activist. I'm a journalist. What I see, I report. He said to me, you will never get a job in Swedish media because the newsroom in Swedish media today is populated either by Muslim radicals or Swedish far left. So I don't know which one is worse.
It's quite a competition. Yes, sorry.
Thank you. I've got a technical question. You do podcasts. Are they heard in the Arab world or does the Arab world block it? I know when I try to listen to CNN America, unless I have a VPN, I can't get the channel. It gets blocked. It's not heard. Are you a podcast, or how do you get technically into the Arab street via the internet?
Can the Arab world hear your podcast easily?
Yes, they could hear it because first we put it on our website, on the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs, and we have a YouTube channel. And then we take, we make short videos, put them on Twitter, on all social media platforms. And what we do is depending if the interview is about Iraq, we will put a lot of focus on Iraqi, what do you call it? Like Iraqi channel on social media. So most of our viewers are from the Arab world. People who are commenting, they are from the Arab world. And I'm really glad that, because this is a unique project. We are the only Israeli think tank who are broadcasting in Arabic, using Arabic voices to debunk the lies.
Maybe you could tell our audience where they could find it, and if it's, and I think you mentioned that some of it has English subtitles. Where can they see that?
So all the interviews are available on this lovely website, the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. It's on the YouTube channel. But sadly, most of the interviews are not translated to English. However, if you go on social media and you go on our social media, like on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or TikTok, all the short interview have English subtitles. And I would encourage you to look at them, because it shows you, and here I have to give some criticism to Israeli media. They're not showing the voices in the Arab world who want peace, who want to normalize ties with Israel, people in the Arab world who hate Hamas, who hate Muslim Brotherhood, who actually support you and condemn the atrocity Hamas committed in October the 7th. And believe it or not, you know, maybe Hamas call itself, it's a Muslim organization, but there are a lot of Muslims who despise Hamas and despise what they did.
Thank you. And I know, because I follow you on Twitter, that your own Twitter account also, you post videos, right? Okay. Do we have any more questions? So maybe we'll ask Yair Stern, who's with us in the audience, if you'd say, do you have anything to add about your experiences with the documentary? Okay, I think, okay. Maybe if we ask a specific question, because
I'll be short.
Okay, so I know it's because Suzanne mentioned that she did this documentary about Avram Stern and the Lehi. Can you tell us about your participation in that?
Well, and Susan approached me, I think it was 3 years ago or so, and I was very surprised that Al Jazeera wants to do a documentary about my father. But after a quick thought, I thought that it's a good idea that even that Al Jazeera is kind of anti-Israel channel, it would be nice that the story of my father will be shown in the Arab world, because Al Jazeera has millions of viewers, and this documentary was supposed to be broadcast in 2 languages, in English and in Arabic. So I took the chance, and Susan came to our home and interviewed me, and they did a good story. I mean, some of it I didn't like. And some people talked against, like this guy, Ilan Pepe, who is Israeli anti-Semite, a hater of Israel. But when you talk about Al Jazeera, I mean, you can't expect a Zionist channel, you know?
Right.
At the end of the day, the final result was a very good documentary. And I think that if people want to watch it, it's still on YouTube.
Yeah, okay, so we
Al
can go to
Jazeera's
YouTube.
channel on YouTube. People ask me that, I mean, aren't you objecting Al Jazeera? And I said, well, it's a free world, and it's better to show the documentary about my father in the Arabic world than not to do anything.
Right, and it's better to have you and Ilan Pape rather than just Ilan Pape.
All right.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to close with one final question, which is more of a personal question, which is, I know that you've been in Israel now for several months. You and I met, I think, not long after you first came here, where we talked about doing this. Can you just say something about your experiences being here in Israel as a non-Israeli, as a non-Jew, and what it's been like for you, sort of just being here, and especially during this time?
I would say amazing. I mean, I consider Israel my second homeland after Kurdistan. Sweden is my third homeland. I will never forget the first time I came to Israel. And I was asked by the border police because on my passport it say I'm born in Baghdad, but I don't have any connection to Baghdad. I'm not an Iraqi, I'm not an Arab. And first he looked at me because I don't look like a traditional Iraqi, but when people see Baghdad, they always stop me. And he asked me, are you from Baghdad? I said to him, no, I'm Kurdish. And it filled my heart with a pride. He didn't say to me, what? And I mean, not in a million years, I would go to anywhere in the world and stop at the security, at the border police, and they ask you, where are you from? And I would say, I'm Kurdish from Kurdistan. Because for most people, it doesn't exist. There is no such a thing called Kurd or Kurdistan. And I honestly, when I said to him, I'm Kurdish, he didn't say to me, what does that mean? And that in itself made me fall in love with the country. I've been coming to Israel for so many times, and I love it. I mean, I don't feel discriminated. I walk around and I feel I'm part of this society. Okay, I don't speak Hebrew. I speak a little, but I like it. I like it, and I hope one day Kurdistan will be independent, and you could come and see my homeland. I do.
Okay. Well, Viva Kurdistan. And I want to thank Suzan Quitaz very much for joining us, for enlightening us. She gave us a lot of information and stories which we don't hear, which we're not hearing elsewhere, which we're not aware of. And I think, especially at this time when there's so much going on, to say the least, in the Middle East, even more than usual, I think the more informed we can be, the better. And that's really what we're endeavoring to do here at the Begin Center in this English program is bring different speakers to give this kind of these different perspectives. So Suzan Quitaz, thank you very, very much. We should check out the website of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs and see what you can find there, especially the podcasts, and certainly follow Suzan on Twitter if you're on Twitter. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.